The silver hull of the Zephyrian research vessel Nexus Prime gleamed against the dark void of space. Captain Vexthul stood on the bridge, his forearms working across multiple control panels as he reviewed the latest catch. Behind him, the ship's massive viewing screen showed the damaged remains of a small craft floating in their cargo bay. "Another primitive vessel," First Officer Kelshawn commented, her voice carrying the musical tones typical of their species. She gestured at the screen with one of her secondary arms. "The technology is barely functional. Chemical propulsion, basic energy shields, crude weapons systems." Vexthul nodded, his compound eyes reflecting the bridge's soft blue light. In his 3 centuries of exploring the galaxy, he had seen thousands of species take their first stumbling steps into space. Most followed predictable patterns. They developed faster than light travel, made contact with other species, and either joined the galactic community or destroyed themselves trying. "What about the pilot?" he asked. "Alive but unresponsive." Dr. Kethamore's voice came through the communication system from the medical bay. "The specimen appears to be from a species we have not cataloged before. They call themselves humans according to the basic translation software." The captain's interest grew slightly. New species were always worth studying, even if they rarely offered anything surprising. Physical condition? Stable. No obvious injuries from the capture. The human shows typical bipedal structure, similar to dozens of other species we have encountered. Average height, standard carbon-based biology, unremarkable in most ways. Vexthul walked to the observation deck that looked down into the ship's research section. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see the human in containment cell 7. The creature sat perfectly still on the simple bench provided, staring straight ahead. No pacing, no shouting, no attempts to escape or communicate. The human was smaller than he had expected. Most spacefaring species developed robust physical forms to handle the demands of interstellar travel. This one looked almost fragile. Short brown hair, pale skin, wearing what appeared to be some kind of uniform in dark blue. The clothing showed no obvious technological enhancements or armor. "Has it spoken at all?" Vexthul asked. "Nothing," came the reply from Dr. Kethamore. "We have tried several communication methods. Basic mathematical sequences, visual patterns, even mild discomfort to encourage a response. The human simply sits there." This was unusual. Most captured specimens either showed fear, anger, or curiosity. They tried to communicate, escape, or at least explore their surroundings. This human did none of those things. It just sat and watched. "Run the standard biological scans," the captain ordered. "I want a complete analysis of their physiology, brain activity, and genetic structure. Add this species to the research database." "Already in progress, sir. Initial scans show some interesting anomalies, such as..." Dr. Kethamore paused before responding. "The human's brain shows unusual activity patterns, high levels of neural networking, but in areas we do not typically associate with higher intelligence. Also, their cardiovascular system appears to be designed for extreme stress situations. The muscle density is higher than expected for a species with their apparent technology level." Vexthul considered this information. Sometimes primitive species retained physical advantages from their evolutionary past. It made sense that a young spacefaring race might still carry traits from their world's dangerous predators or harsh environment. "Continue the observations. How long has the specimen been conscious?" "Approximately 6 hours since we brought it aboard. It has not slept, eaten, or shown any signs of distress. Biometrics remain remarkably stable." The captain looked down at the human again. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, according to the identification found in her craft, sat exactly as she had hours ago. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. Her breathing was slow and steady. Her eyes moved occasionally, but in a pattern that seemed almost random. What Vexthul could not see was the careful intelligence behind those movements. Chen was counting. Patrol rotations, guard changes, the timing of automated systems. She listened to every sound, feeling every vibration through the ship's hull. The soft hum of the engines told her about power distribution. The slight changes in artificial gravity revealed information about the ship's movement patterns. She had been awake for much longer than 6 hours. Chen had been conscious when they first captured her ship, had felt the tractor beam lock onto her vessel, had experienced the careful process of being brought aboard. She understood more about her situation than her captors realized. The Zephyrians had made several mistakes already. They assumed her stillness meant shock or primitive fear. They believed her silence indicated a lack of intelligence or communication ability. Most importantly, they had placed her in a cell that allowed her to observe their routines and procedures. Chen had identified at least 12 different crew members by their footsteps and voices. She knew the ship operated on a 26-hour cycle, based on the pattern of shift changes. The guards checked her cell every 43 minutes, always approaching from the same direction. The medical scanning equipment activated every 2 hours, sending barely detectable energy pulses through the containment area. Dr. Kethmore appeared at the cell door for another examination. The Zephyrian was tall and thin, with delicate features and the characteristic forearms of his species. He carried several scanning devices and moved with the confidence of someone who had performed this routine hundreds of times before. "Fascinating," he murmured, reading the data from his instruments. "Elevated adrenaline levels, but no corresponding stress indicators. It is as if this species has natural control over their fight-or-flight responses." Chen allowed the scans without resistance. Each examination gave her more information about Zephyrian technology and medical knowledge. Their scanners were advanced but followed predictable patterns. Their medical equipment operated on specific energy frequencies that she was beginning to understand. The doctor made notes on his tablet, occasionally glancing at Chen as if expecting some reaction. When none came, he shook his head and continued his work. "The muscular structure is particularly interesting," he said, apparently speaking to his recording device. "Dense fiber development suggests this species evolved from persistence hunters. The ability to maintain physical activity over extended periods without fatigue, not uncommon among primitive species but rarely seen in spacefaring civilizations." Chen almost smiled at that comment. Persistence hunters. If only they knew. Dr. Kethmore finished his scans and prepared to leave. As he reached the cell door, he turned back for one final look. "I wonder what you were thinking about, little human." Chen met his gaze for just a moment. In that brief eye contact, something passed between them. The doctor felt a small chill, though he could not explain why. The human's expression had not changed, but something in those eyes seemed different, more focused, more aware. He shook off the feeling and left the containment area. Behind him, Chen returned to her careful observation and planning. The Zephyrians thought they were studying a primitive specimen. They had no idea they had captured something much more dangerous. Hours passed. The ship's routine continued unchanged. Guards made their rounds, scientists conducted their studies, and Captain Vexthul reviewed reports from his crew. Everything appeared normal aboard the Nexus Prime, but small changes were beginning to occur. Minor fluctuations in the ship's computer systems. Barely detectable variations in power distribution. Tiny anomalies that the automated systems registered, but dismissed as normal operational variances. Chen had been busy during her moments of apparent stillness. Each time they moved her for examinations, she observed everything. The layout of corridors, the placement of access panels, the weak points in their security systems. More importantly, she had begun to understand how their technology worked. The ship's systems were advanced but predictable. They relied heavily on automation and central control. The Zephyrians had clearly never encountered a species that could learn and adapt as quickly as humans could. They had no defenses against an intelligence that could find patterns in chaos and exploit weaknesses they did not even know existed. As the ship's night cycle began, Chen finally allowed herself to rest. But even in sleep, part of her mind remained active, processing information, building plans, preparing for what was to come. The Zephyrians thought they had captured a primitive creature for study. They had no idea they had invited a predator onto their ship, a predator that was patient, intelligent, and already beginning to hunt. 3 days had passed since the humans' capture, and Dr. Kethmore found himself increasingly puzzled by his latest research subject. He stood in his laboratory, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing the results of countless scans and tests performed on Lieutenant Sarah Chen. "Computer, display comparative analysis of specimen physiology," he commanded. The air before him filled with three-dimensional models of various species. The human form rotated slowly in the center, surrounded by data streams and biological readouts. Dr. Kethmore gestured with two of his arms, manipulating the display to focus on specific systems. "Remarkable," he murmured to himself. "Cardiovascular efficiency rating of 8.7. That puts them in the same category as the Corvin Raiders and the Thesh military caste. He paused the display on the human nervous system. The brain imaging showed patterns he had never seen before in any species. Most intelligent life forms showed clear specialization in their neural development. Warriors had enhanced reflexes and spatial awareness. Scholars showed increased activity in logic and memory centers. Traders and diplomats displayed strong social and emotional intelligence. Humans seem to have developed all of these traits simultaneously. Computer, compare human neural activity to database of known species. Comparison complete. Human neural patterns show characteristics found in 47 different species classifications. No single species match found. Dr. Kethmore stared at the data. In 300 years of xenobiology research, he had never encountered a species that combined so many different evolutionary advantages. Most creatures specialized. Humans appeared to have remained generalists, which should have made them weaker, not stronger. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from the bridge. Dr. Kethmore, please report to the captain's quarters immediately. The doctor saved his research and made his way through the ship's curved corridors. The Nexus Prime was designed for comfort and efficiency, with wide passages and soft lighting that adjusted automatically to each crew member's preferences. As he walked, he noticed some of the junior technicians working on access panels. Routine maintenance? He asked Technician Yultar as he passed. Minor system anomalies, the young Zephyrian replied, his attention focused on his diagnostic scanner. Nothing serious, but the computer has been registering small fluctuations in various systems. Probably just normal wear from our extended research mission. Dr. Kethmore nodded and continued to the captain's quarters. He found Vexthul standing before a large viewing port looking out at the stars. The captain's forearms were clasped behind his back in a gesture of deep thought. You requested to see me, Captain? Yes, Doctor. I want your assessment of the human specimen. Are we learning anything useful? Dr. Kethmore activated his personal tablet, calling up his research notes. The species is more complex than initially anticipated. Their physiology suggests they evolved on what we would classify as a death world. High gravity, dangerous predators, extreme environmental variations. That explains their physical development. What about their intelligence? That is where it becomes interesting, Captain. Human brain structure shows adaptations we typically see in multiple different species. Pattern recognition capabilities that rival the best scout species. Problem-solving skills comparable to our finest engineers. Memory capacity that exceeds most diplomatic castes. Captain Vexthul turned from the viewing port, his compound eyes reflecting concern. Are you suggesting this species could pose a threat? Not necessarily, sir. Many species show impressive capabilities in laboratory settings. The key is technological development. This human ship was clearly primitive by our standards. Chemical rockets, basic energy shields, simple weapons. Even with their biological advantages, they appeared to be centuries behind us technologically. The captain seemed satisfied with this assessment. Continue your research, Doctor, but maintain security protocols. I want to know immediately if the specimen shows any unusual behavior. Dr. Kethmore returned to his laboratory, but he could not shake a growing feeling of unease. Something about the human bothered him, though he could not identify exactly what. The creature's complete stillness was unnatural for an intelligent species. Most captured subjects showed some emotion, some response to their situation. Lieutenant Chen continued her patient observation routine. She had mapped the entire ship's layout by sound and vibration analysis. The Nexus Prime was larger than she had initially estimated, with approximately 200 crew members and extensive research facilities. More importantly, she had begun to understand their technology. The Zephyrians used a highly centralized computer system that controlled everything from life support to navigation. It was efficient but created vulnerabilities that a human tactician could exploit. During her daily medical examinations, Chen had been conducting her own tests. Each time Dr. Kethmore used his scanning equipment, she learned more about the energy frequencies and data patterns the devices produced. The Zephyrians assumed she was passive, but she was actually gathering intelligence with every interaction. The ship's computer system fascinated her. It operated on quantum processing principles that were more advanced than anything Earth had developed. But the security protocols were designed to prevent external hacking, not internal manipulation by someone who understood the system's logic patterns. Chen had identified 17 separate subsystems that controlled various ship functions. Environmental controls, navigation, communications, defensive systems, internal sensors, and others. Each system had built-in redundancies and safeguards, but they all ultimately connected to the central processing core. The key was patience. The Zephyrians expected immediate responses from most species: fight, flight, fear, anger, negotiation attempts. They had no protocols for dealing with a subject who could wait for days or weeks while gathering information and planning. On her 4th day of captivity, Chen began Phase 2 of her plan. During routine transport to the medical bay, she made her first deliberate action. As the guards escorted her through a corridor junction, she stumbled slightly and placed her hand against an access panel for balance. The contact lasted less than 2 seconds. To the guards, it appeared to be nothing more than a minor misstep. They helped her regain her footing and continued to the medical bay without concern. But in those 2 seconds, Chen had felt the electromagnetic pulse patterns from the ship's internal systems. Her enhanced training as an Earth Defense Corps officer included basic understanding of alien technology principles. The access panel's energy signature told her exactly what she needed to know about the ship's internal network. Dr. Kethmore continued his examinations, growing more puzzled by the day. The human's biometrics remained impossibly stable. Heart rate, blood pressure, neural activity, all showed the patterns of someone completely at rest. Despite being held captive on an alien vessel, computer, compare current human stress indicators with baseline readings from initial capture. No significant variation detected. Subject maintains consistent physiological patterns. The doctor frowned. Every species showed some stress response to captivity, even if they tried to hide it. Elevated cortisol levels, increased heart rate, changes in brain chemistry. The human showed none of these indicators. It was as if Lieutenant Chen was completely comfortable with her situation. What Dr. Kethmore did not realize was that Chen had been trained for exactly this scenario. Earth Defense Corps officers underwent extensive preparation for potential alien contact situations. They learned to control their physiological responses, to gather intelligence under adverse conditions, and to maintain operational effectiveness even when cut off from support. The Zephyrians had captured a soldier, not a civilian. A soldier who had been specifically trained to operate behind enemy lines. As the days passed, the small system anomalies aboard the Nexus Prime began to increase in frequency. Nothing dramatic or immediately dangerous, but the ship's automated monitoring systems registered hundreds of minor fluctuations. Power grid variations, sensor calibration drifts, communication static bursts. Chief Engineer Torvon reported these issues to Captain Vexthul during the daily briefing. "The problems are spread throughout the ship, sir. No pattern we can identify. It appears to be random system aging, perhaps accelerated by our extended mission in deep space." "Can you repair the problems?" "We are working on them continuously, Captain. Each issue is minor and easily corrected, but as soon as we fix one problem, another appears elsewhere. It is somewhat frustrating but not dangerous to ship operations." Captain Vexthul accepted this explanation. Space vessels were complex machines, and minor malfunctions were normal after months of continuous operation. He had more important concerns, like the research data they were gathering and their planned return to Zephyrian space. None of the crew realized that the random system failures were anything but random. Chen had been using her brief moments outside the containment cell to conduct what military strategists called preparation of the battlefield. Each touch of an access panel, each moment of observation, each careful analysis of their routines was building toward something larger. The human was no longer just gathering intelligence. She was beginning to actively modify the ship's systems, making tiny changes that would not be noticed until it was too late. Lieutenant Chen understood something. The doctor, Kethmore, approached the containment cell on the 7th day with his usual collection of scanning equipment. But something felt different. He could not identify the source of his unease, but the atmosphere aboard the ship had grown tense over the past few days. The minor system malfunctions were becoming more frequent, and several crew members had reported strange dreams and feelings of being watched. "Beginning daily examination of human specimen," he announced to his recording device as he entered the secure area. "Lieutenant?" Chen sat in her familiar position on the bench, hands resting calmly in her lap, eyes focused straight ahead. But as Dr. Kethmore approached the containment field controls, she spoke for the first time since her capture. "You're all dead." The words were delivered in a whisper so quiet that the doctor almost missed them. He stopped, his four hands freezing over the control panel. The human had not moved, had not changed expression, had not even looked at him, but the words hung in the air like ice crystals. "What did you say?" Dr. Kethmore asked, his voice carrying a tremor he tried to suppress. Chen turned her head slowly to meet his gaze. For the first time in 7 days, she looked directly at him. Her eyes held an intelligence and awareness that sent a chill through the Zephyrian scientist. This was not the vacant stare of a primitive creature. This was the focused attention of a predator. "You're all dead," she repeated, her voice still barely above a whisper. "You just don't know it yet." Dr. Kethmore backed away from the containment field, his heart's racing. He activated his communication device with trembling fingers. "Captain Vexthul to medical bay immediately. The human has spoken." Within minutes, the medical bay filled with senior crew members. Captain Vexthul, First Officer Kelshan, Security Chief Rickstan, and Dr. Kethmore all stood before the containment cell, studying the human who had returned to her silent observation. "What exactly did it say?" the captain demanded. "A threat, sir. The human claimed that we were all dead." The tone was not emotional or desperate. It was stated as fact. Security Chief Rickstan stepped forward, his weapon systems activated. "Should we consider this a direct threat?" "I can increase security measures immediately." Captain Vexthul studied Chen carefully. The human showed no signs of aggression or distress. If anything, she appeared more relaxed than she had been in days. "Doctor, have your scans detected any changes in the specimen's condition?" Dr. Kethmore checked his instruments, frowning at the readings. "This is unusual, Captain. The human's stress indicators have actually decreased since speaking. Heart rate is lower. Brain activity shows patterns consistent with satisfaction or accomplishment. As if making the threat relieved some internal pressure? No, sir. More like completing a task that had been planned for some time." First Officer Kelshan moved closer to the containment field. "Human," she called out in the basic translation language they had established. "Explain your statement." "What did you mean?" Chen turned to look at her, the same focused predator's gaze that had unsettled Dr. Kethmore. She did not speak again, but something in her expression made Kelshan step backward involuntarily. "Captain," Security Chief Rickstan said urgently, "I recommend we move the specimen to maximum security containment immediately. This behavior change suggests hostile intent." "Agreed. Prepare transfer protocols." But as they began to discuss security measures, Chief Engineer Torvan's voice came through the communication system with obvious panic. "Captain, we have a serious problem. Multiple systems throughout the ship are experiencing cascading failures. Life support is fluctuating. Navigation is showing error codes, and the main computer is reporting data corruption in 17 different subsystems." Captain Vexthul felt his blood chill. "Are we in immediate danger?" "Not yet, sir, but the failures are accelerating. It's as if something is systematically attacking our ship's infrastructure, but that's impossible. We're in deep space with no hostile contacts, and our internal security shows no signs of intrusion." The captain looked back at Chen, who was watching him with what might have been amusement. "Doctor, is there any way the human could be responsible for these system failures?" Dr. Kethmore reviewed his data frantically. "Impossible, sir. The specimen has been under constant observation in a contained environment. She has had no access to ship systems or technology, even if humans possessed some form of biological electromagnetic capability, which our scans indicate they do not. The containment field would prevent any interference." But even as he spoke, Dr. Kethmore felt a growing doubt. The timing was too perfect. 7 days of silent observation, followed by a threat, followed immediately by ship-wide system failures. If this was a coincidence, it was a remarkable one. "Chief Engineer, implement emergency protocols," Captain Vexthul ordered. "Isolate all affected systems and begin diagnostic procedures." "Sir, that's just it. The affected systems are not following normal failure patterns. The problems appear random, but they're targeting exactly the systems we need for basic operation: environmental controls, navigation, communications, defensive systems. It's as if something understands our technology well enough to attack our most vulnerable points." Chen finally spoke again, her voice carrying clearly through the medical bay. "Persistence hunters," Dr. Kethmore turned sharply. "What? That's what you called us?" "Persistence hunters. Did you research what that means?" The doctor activated his tablet, calling up his notes on human evolution. As he read, his expression grew pale. Persistence hunting is a technique where predators exhaust their prey through extended pursuit. The hunter does not attempt to overpower the prey immediately. Instead, they wear it down gradually until the prey can no longer escape. That's right, Chen said, her voice remaining calm and conversational. We evolved to hunt things bigger and stronger than ourselves. Mammoths, giant predators, creatures that could kill us easily in direct confrontation. So we learned patience. We learned to study our prey, understand its weaknesses, and attack when it was most vulnerable. Captain Vexthul felt understanding dawn with horrible clarity. You have been studying us. For 7 days, Chen confirmed. Learning your routines, understanding your technology, identifying your vulnerabilities. Every scan, every examination, every moment you thought I was passive, I was actually gathering intelligence. Security Chief Riksdan powered up his weapon systems. How? You have been under constant observation in a secured containment field. Chen smiled for the first time since her capture. It was not a pleasant expression. Your security is designed to prevent escape or communication. It was never designed to prevent learning. Every time you moved me for examinations, I observed your ship's layout. Every scan you performed taught me about your technology. Every conversation I overheard revealed information about your procedures and capabilities. But the system failures, Dr. Kethmore protested. You have had no physical contact with ship systems. Humans are very good at finding patterns, Chen explained. Your ship operates on predictable cycles. Power distribution follows specific algorithms. Communication frequencies operate within defined parameters. Once you understand the patterns, you can influence them without direct access. Chief Engineer Torvin's voice came through the communication system again, now with barely controlled panic. Captain, the failures are accelerating exponentially. We have lost primary navigation. Environmental controls are cycling randomly, and the main computer is showing cascade errors throughout the entire network. How is this possible? Captain Vexthul demanded. Chen stood up for the first time in 7 days, moving with fluid grace that belied her days of apparent inactivity. Your containment field operates on rotating energy frequencies to prevent interference. But those frequencies follow a pattern. Once you understand the pattern, you can synchronize your bioelectric field to create resonance effects. Dr. Kethmore stared at his readings in horror. The minor fluctuations we detected. You were using your body's natural electromagnetic field to create interference patterns. Very small at first, Chen agreed. Just enough to create minor errors in your computer systems. But computer errors compound. One small mistake leads to another, which leads to another. Your automated repair systems tried to fix the problems but ended up making them worse because they were working from corrupted baseline data. You turned our own computers against us, First Officer Kelshawn said with dawning realization. Persistence hunting, Chen repeated. I didn't try to overpower your systems directly. That would have been detected immediately. Instead, I introduced small errors and let your own technology destroy itself. Captain Vexthul backed away from the containment field. Security Chief, maximum alert. All available personnel to secure the human immediately. But as he spoke, the lights flickered and died, plunging the medical bay into emergency lighting. The containment field shimmered and disappeared as power systems throughout the ship began failing in cascade. Chen stepped out of her cell calmly, stretching muscles that had been held in careful stillness for 7 days. The hunt begins now. In the red glow of emergency lighting, her smile looked The emergency lighting cast long red shadows through the corridors of the Nexus Prime, as Lieutenant Sarah Chen moved through the ship with the silent grace of a hunter. Behind her in the medical bay, Security Chief Riksdan was frantically trying to coordinate a response while Captain Vexthul attempted to regain control of his vessel. All security teams converge on Medical Bay 7, Riksdan commanded through his communication device. Human specimen has escaped containment. Consider extremely dangerous. But Chen was no longer in the medical bay. She had memorized the ship's layout during her 7 days of careful observation, and she moved through the darkened corridors with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. The Nexus Prime was designed for a species that relied heavily on advanced technology and automated systems. Wide corridors, gentle curves, soft lighting that adjusted automatically to each individual's preferences. It was comfortable and efficient for the Zephyrians, but it had not been designed as a battleground. Chen reached her first objective within minutes of escaping the medical bay. A maintenance access panel in Corridor Junction 7, exactly where she had calculated it would be based on the ship's logical design patterns. She placed her palm against the panel and felt the familiar electromagnetic pulses of the ship's internal network. 7 days of study had taught her the access codes, not through any advanced technology but through simple observation. She had watched the maintenance crews enter their authorization sequences, had listened to the musical tones each button press made, had felt the slight vibrations through the ship's hull as the panels opened and closed. The access panel slid open silently. Inside, conduits and fiber optic cables carried the ship's vital communications and control signals. Chen reached for a specific cluster of cables, ones she had identified as carrying environmental control data to the forward sections of the ship. She did not cut the cables or damage them directly. That would have been too obvious and easily repaired. Instead, she carefully rerouted several connections, creating feedback loops that would cause the environmental systems to receive conflicting instructions. The changes were subtle, but devastating. In the forward sections, artificial gravity began fluctuating randomly. Temperature controls started cycling between extreme heat and cold. Atmospheric processors received conflicting data about oxygen levels and began making unnecessary adjustments. "What's happening to the ship?" Dr. Kethmore's voice echoed through the communication system as he tried to reach the bridge. Chief Engineer Torvin's response came back filled with panic. "Multiple cascade failures throughout all systems. Environmental controls are completely unstable. We're losing life support in sections 3 through 7. Chen sealed the access panel and moved to her next objective. The ship's layout was logical and predictable, designed by engineers who valued efficiency over security. Each system had backup controls located at regular intervals, all following the same design principles. She found Technician Yultar working frantically at a diagnostic station, trying to identify the source of the ship's problems. The young Zephyrian was so focused on his instruments that he did not notice Chen approaching from behind until she was close enough to touch him. "System failures usually start small," she said quietly. Yultar spun around, his forearms reaching for his emergency communicator. But Chen was faster. Her hand closed over his primary manipulator appendage with gentle but irresistible pressure. One small error creates 2 errors. 2 errors create 4 errors. 4 errors create 8. The mathematics of cascade failure are really quite elegant. "The human," Yultar whispered, his compound eyes wide with terror. "You are supposed to be contained." "I was never contained," Chen replied conversationally. "I was studying, learning your ship, understanding your weaknesses, preparing for this moment." She applied pressure to a specific nerve cluster in the Zephyrian's arm, a technique she had learned during xenobiology training. Yultar collapsed unconsciously, his body shutting down as his nervous system received signals it was not designed to handle. Chen dragged the unconscious technician into a nearby storage compartment, then returned to his diagnostic station. The instruments showed exactly what she had expected. The Zephyrians were trying to repair their ship's failures by treating each problem as an isolated incident. They had not yet realized that all the problems were connected, part of a larger pattern designed to maximize damage while minimizing detectability. She began entering new commands into the diagnostic system. Not attacks or direct sabotage, but subtle modifications to the repair protocols themselves. Each time the automated systems tried to fix a problem, they would inadvertently create new ones. "Security team to Junction 7. Rixdan's voice came through the communication system. "Technician Yultar is not responding to calls." Chen moved away from the diagnostic station just as the first security team rounded the corner. But the ship's failing systems worked in her favor. The corridor lighting flickered unpredictably, creating shadows that danced and shifted. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making the Zephyrians stumble and lose their footing. Most importantly, the ship's internal sensors were receiving corrupted data. The security team's tracking equipment showed multiple false readings as the ship's computer systems struggled to process conflicting information. "She was here," one of the security officers reported. "Bioscanners detect recent human presence, but current location is unclear." Chen was already 3 corridors away, moving through the ship's service passages. The Zephyrians had designed their vessel with numerous maintenance tunnels and access ways, all large enough for their crew to perform routine repairs. They had never considered that these same passages could be used by an enemy to move unseen through their ship. Her next target was the main power distribution center. Chen had identified its location by tracking the subtle electromagnetic signatures she had felt during her examinations. The center was heavily protected, but the protections were designed to prevent external attack or system overload, not infiltration by someone who understood the ship's operating principles. The power center was located in the ship's heavily shielded core section. Chen approached through a maintenance shaft that ran parallel to the main corridor. Through the shaft's observation panel, she could see 2 guards stationed outside the power center's entrance. She waited patiently, counting their patrol patterns. The guards were nervous, constantly checking their communication devices and scanning the corridor for threats. But they were watching for an external attack, not someone approaching from inside the ship's own infrastructure. When both guards turned to investigate a noise from the main corridor, Chen slipped from the maintenance shaft and into the power center. The room hummed with barely contained energy, massive conduits carrying power to every system aboard the ship. Chen did not attempt to damage the power systems directly. That would have been too dangerous and would likely have killed everyone aboard, including herself. Instead, she began making careful adjustments to the power distribution algorithms. The changes were mathematical rather than physical. She altered the priority codes that determined which systems received power during emergency situations. Life support remained functional but at reduced efficiency. Defensive systems were given lower priority than non-essential comfort systems. Navigation computers were set to receive fluctuating power that would cause intermittent failures. "Captain?" Chief Engineer Torvan's voice came through the ship's communication system, now distorted by increasing interference. "The power problems are becoming critical. We have stable life support, but navigation and defensive systems are failing randomly. Can you repair them?" Captain Vexthul's response was barely audible through the static. "We keep fixing problems, but new ones appear faster than we can solve them. It's as if something is actively working against our repair efforts." Chen finished her modifications and prepared to leave the power center. But as she approached the exit, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy military-precise steps that belonged to Security Chief Rixdan and his elite guard unit. "The human is using our own ship against us," Rixdan was saying to his team. "She understands our technology well enough to cause targeted damage without direct system access. We need to think like hunters, not like security guards." Chen smiled at that comment. The Zephyrians were finally beginning to understand what they were facing. But understanding and being able to respond effectively were 2 very different things. She retreated deeper into the power center, moving between the massive energy conduits toward an alternate exit she had identified during her initial survey. The room's electromagnetic field would interfere with the Zephyrian scanning equipment, giving her time to reach the next phase of her plan. Behind her, Rixdan and his team entered the power center cautiously, their weapons ready but uncertain what they were hunting. They found evidence of Chen's presence but no trace of the human herself. "She knows this ship better than we do," one of the guards observed. "Impossible," Rixdan replied. "She has been aboard for only 7 days, most of that time in containment. Then how is she moving through our ship like she built it herself?" Rixdan did not have an answer for that question, but Chen could have told him. Humans had spent thousands of years learning to hunt in unfamiliar territory. They developed. Captain Vexthul stood alone on the bridge of the Nexus Prime, watching his ship die around him. The main viewing screen flickered between static and distorted images. The navigation systems showed impossible readings, and half of his control panels displayed error messages in languages his translation software could no longer process. In the past hour, he had lost contact with most of his crew. Security teams reported finding unconscious colleagues in storage compartments, maintenance areas, and empty laboratories. The human had not killed anyone, but she had systematically eliminated resistance with surgical precision. "Captain," Dr. Kethamor's voice came through the failing communication system. "I am trapped in Laboratory Section 4. The blast doors have sealed, and life support is cycling unpredictably. I do not think this is accidental." Vexthul tried to respond, but his communication array was experiencing the same cascade failures as every other system aboard the ship. His message to Dr. Kethamor came out as electronic static, mixed with fragments of old conversations. The human was no longer just sabotaging their ship. She was hunting them individually, using the vessel itself as a weapon to separate and isolate crew members before moving in for capture. Computer, locate human specimen, Vexthul commanded, unable to comply. Internal sensors experiencing widespread data corruption. Multiple false positives detected throughout ship. The captain pulled up the ship's internal schematic, trying to identify areas where Chen might be hiding. But as he studied the display, he realized the futility of his efforts. The human had spent 7 days learning every detail of their ship's design. She knew systems and passages that even some of his crew had forgotten existed. A soft sound from behind him made Vexthul turn. Chen stood in the bridge's rear entrance, having approached through the command section's private access corridor. She looked completely calm, her uniform only slightly disheveled from crawling through maintenance shafts. "Hello, Captain," she said conversationally. Vexthul reached for his sidearm, but Chen raised one hand in a gesture that stopped him cold. "I wouldn't recommend that," she said. "Your weapon systems are operating on corrupted targeting data. There's a 73% chance it will misfire and damage something vital. Like your life support controls." The captain's hand froze over his weapon. "What do you want?" Chen walked casually to the main communication console, her movements fluid and confident. "I want to have a conversation. You and I need to discuss the situation between our species. You have murdered my crew." "Actually, I haven't killed anyone," Chen corrected. "Your crew members are unconscious and secured in various locations throughout the ship. I could have killed them easily, but that wasn't necessary for my objectives." Vexthul stared at her in confusion. "Then what are your objectives?" Chen began working at the communication console, her fingers moving over controls she had never seen before with disturbing familiarity. "I'm sending a message to my people. A detailed intelligence package about Zephyrian technology, capabilities and intentions. How do you know our communication codes?" "I don't," Chen replied. "But your codes are based on mathematical principles that any intelligent species would eventually develop. I'm not breaking your encryption. I'm simply using your own emergency beacon protocols to transmit on frequencies my people will recognize." The captain watched in horror as she accessed systems that should have been completely secure. "Impossible. Those frequencies require authorization codes that only senior command staff possess." Chen smiled. "Captain, you've been thinking about this situation incorrectly from the beginning. You assumed humans were primitive because our technology appears limited compared to yours, but you never considered that we might have chosen a different evolutionary path." She finished her work at the communication console and turned to face him directly. "Humans don't rely entirely on technology because we learned something important during our development. Technology can fail. It can be corrupted, hacked, destroyed, or turned against you. Biological capabilities, intellectual adaptability, and tactical creativity are much more reliable. You destroyed our ship with nothing but observation and basic understanding of our systems. I turned your ship against itself," Chen corrected. "Every system aboard this vessel was designed to make your lives easier and more comfortable. Automated repairs, centralized control, predictable patterns. All of that efficiency created vulnerabilities that someone with patience and intelligence could exploit." Captain Vexthul felt understanding, dawn with horrible clarity. "You planned this from the moment we captured you." "I planned for this possibility from the moment I left Earth space," Chen replied. "Earth Defense Corps officers are trained to operate behind enemy lines with minimal support. We study alien psychology, technology principles, and tactical adaptation techniques. But how could you know about our species specifically?" Chen gestured at the bridge around them. "I didn't need to know about Zephyrians specifically. The principles are universal. Any advanced spacefaring species will develop certain technological dependencies. Automated systems, centralized control, predictable operational patterns. These efficiencies always create exploitable weaknesses." The communication console chimed softly, indicating that Chen's message had been successfully transmitted. "What did you tell them?" Vexthul asked. "Everything," Chen replied simply. "Complete technical specifications of your ship, detailed analysis of your military capabilities, behavioral patterns I observed in your crew, and strategic recommendations for Earth's response to contact with your species." "Earth will attack us?" Chen shook her head. "Earth will be prepared for you. When your people come looking for this ship, they'll find humans who understand exactly what they're facing. Your technological advantages will be countered by superior tactics and preparation. Captain Vexthul sank into his command chair, the full scope of the disaster becoming clear. You've started a war. No, Chen said firmly. You started this when you captured me for study like a laboratory specimen. I'm simply ensuring that when our species meet again, the encounter will be on more equal terms. She moved to the navigation console and began entering new commands. I'm programming your ship to return to Zephyrian space. Your crew will recover consciousness in a few hours, and your systems will gradually stabilize as the cascade failures run their course. Why are you letting us live? Chen paused in her work to look at him directly. Because humans understand something your species apparently doesn't. The goal of conflict isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's education. Education? Your people need to learn that humans aren't primitive specimens to be captured and studied. We're persistence hunters who evolved on a death world, developed intelligence and adaptability as survival traits, and chose to remain generalist rather than become dependent on advanced technology. She finished programming the navigation system and stepped away from the console. When you return to your people, you'll carry a message. Humans are not prey. We're not subjects for research. We're predators who happen to be capable of reason and diplomacy. And if we choose war instead of diplomacy, Chen's expression grew cold. Then you'll discover why humans became apex predators on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. You'll learn what persistence hunting really means when applied to interstellar warfare. She moved toward the bridge's emergency exit, then stopped and turned back to face the captain one final time. Tell your people something else, Captain. Today you saw what one human could do to your most advanced research vessel. With nothing but patience and intelligence, Earth has billions of humans and many of them are much more dangerous than I am. How do we prevent this war? Vexthul asked desperately. Simple, Chen replied. Treat humans as equals. Open diplomatic relations instead of capturing us for study. Respect our sovereignty instead of assuming you can take what you want from our space. And if we do this, humans will be peaceful? Chen smiled, but it was not entirely reassuring. Humans can be the most loyal allies or the most implacable enemies in the galaxy. The choice is entirely up to you. She disappeared through the emergency exit, leaving Captain Vexthul alone with his thoughts and his crippled ship. Hours later, as the Nexus Prime limped towards Zephyrian space with its confused and frightened crew, Earth received Chen's intelligence package. Within days, human shipyards began working around the clock, producing vessels designed specifically to counter Zephyrian technology. When the Zephyrian High Command finally learned the fate of their research vessel, they faced a choice that would determine the future of both species. They could continue their policy of treating humans as primitive subjects for study, and face a war against an enemy that had already proven its ability to turn superior technology into a weakness. Or they could accept Chen's message and approach humanity as equals, potentially gaining allies who understood better than anyone how to survive in a dangerous galaxy. The choice was theirs. But as one final gesture, Chen had left a modification in the Nexus Prime's computer systems.